So, hi everyone, Heath with Cillessen Construction. We are here on Ask a Builder, and today we are doing our first remote interview, and we're interviewing Zack Giffin, who is a tiny home builder, really an expert at building tiny homes. So, Zack, welcome to the show. We're glad you could jump on and join us today.
Well, I am really honored to be here. Thank you for having me. And it is remote, but I do have connections to Colorado, right? Because I did grow up there.
That's right. Yeah. So that's how we really found Zack. And so, Zack, you grew up in Gold Hill, Colorado, right?
Yeah, it's about 10 miles west of Boulder.
Yeah.
Kind of between Nederland and Ward.
Okay. So when did you move away from Colorado?
I moved to Washington in 2003.
Okay.
So, a little more than 20 years ago. But I was basically coming back every summer. I was kind of going out there for the winter. I was on ski patrol. I worked at the mountain.
Yeah.
I was kind of ski bum, and then I'd come back and build homes all summer.
Yeah.
With a good friend of mine was basically made my life work by keeping a job open for me.
Yeah. How cool. So did you build a lot of homes in like the Boulder, Nederland area, in that kind of area up there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was like big construction boom all those years through the 2000s. And in Boulder County, like because of kind of land use policies, there just wasn't a lot of new construction.
Yeah.
So almost everything that we did was major renovations.
Yeah.
And it was the type of thing where you'd take it down to like the foundations, the floor structure and like one wall. To then you could call it a renovation, right? But you're basically redoing the whole thing.
It's amazing. It's still that way a lot in the Front Range right now. I mean, there's not a ton of land opportunities. So same thing. We're taking stuff down to foundations and maybe a couple walls and then rebuilding a new home, which it's funny. Everyone always thinks that's easier than building a new home, and really building a new home is a lot easier than doing that.
I would definitely agree with that for sure. Especially, like the more you take down of the home, the easier it is to build. Yeah. Two parts of my experience of working, kind of building big homes in Colorado, was kind of eye-opener and kind of led me down the path of tiny homes. And one was just like the feeling that I was, building these beautiful homes, like cherry trim, I was kind of the finish guy. And so it was really nice work and I loved it all, but it just didn't feel like anybody was really going to notice or appreciate because some of these homes are so big, so few people in them. Like how many people are actually going to be in the basement in these kind of zones where I'm spending all this time, like, putting so much care into it. Nobody's even going to like pay attention, And so that's one thing building tiny homes is like, it felt more like I'm contributing my energy to something that's like not just an investment for somebody, but like something that they're going to really appreciate, they're going to see all the time, and it's really going to benefit their lives.
We definitely have done a bit of historic work, in Denver and some in Boulder too. And it's always fun when you get to work on historic homes like that, because I think in some ways it challenges your carpentry skills and your creativity to create things that are original or match the original design details, Front Range area. And so that's really where you learned a lot of your carpentry skills.
In Gold Hill, I will say, like, people are like, how'd you get into carpentry? It's like, basically, growing up in Gold Hill, a good percentage, not my father, but a good percentage of all the men in town were all building homes, right? So that was just kind of like what you did. I think, you were expected to go get a job in construction as soon as like you could lift some buckets.
What was the transition to get into tiny homes? So like what made you want to do that and pursue that as a career?
It kind of found me. I think it was the lifestyle I was pursuing. I was would have been like early van life guy before van life was really a thing so much. And it was mostly because I was so focused on skiing. I was this fanatical skier. And that's what brought me to Washington, was going on ski trips, and then, kind of fell in love with this place called Mount Baker. And, so before I ever heard about tiny homes, I had bought an RV, like renovated the RV. That's what when I moved to Mount Baker first, was kind of like the tool. I had a job there, but no place to live. So that was my solution. And then after that, had a van, rigged out the van, because, with skiing, it's that portability is the key, right? Because you can take your van, you can drive it right into the parking lot of the ski area and just like wake up right in the morning ready to go. And you can go from place to place. There's just, that has been a big piece of the ski culture for a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I saw a tiny home for the first time, it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, like a little custom little cabin on trailer, like, sold. So I didn't take much convincing. I just kind of was like, knew it was something I needed to do.
So then did you build your first one for yourself then?
Yeah, exactly. I was kind of a semi-professional skier, and which means like I was a professional skier. I was getting paid by a bunch of companies, but it was definitely not enough to like actually float my life.
Yeah.
So, I was still hustling on the side. Carpentry was my main thing. And basically, got one of my sponsors to kind of fund a project where I built a tiny house and then took it on the road, and we, produced kind of like, what would be known as content now. Back then it was like short films.
Yeah.
And basically that was like my first foray into building what is like fully known as a tiny house. And, it was pretty early in the whole thing. Like there was some other people that had kind of done it, but it wasn't something people had seen. And so it was like pretty quickly we realized like how much of a scene we caused everywhere we went. And, like it was a thing there, right?
Yeah.
And then what really kind of threw me into it is I got hired a couple years later to be the host of a television show called Tiny House Nation.
Yeah.
And, I got an email from a buddy. He was saying like, hey, there's this casting call. And like, dude, it sounds like they're looking for you. And I like read it down. And it was, the age discrepancy of like where I was right in line with the age that they were looking for, had built my own tiny home, lived in it, spoke the language of construction and carpentry, and had kind of I wasn't really afraid of cameras. So it was like, check. And I just wrote them. And then kind of, it wasn't instant, but it was a process. And then I got hired and then just started going rapid fire,
And Tiny House Nation really blew up. It became a really big thing pretty quickly.
Yeah. We were kind of the first TV show around tiny homes. And, within a year or two, I think there was 14 different shows eventually. And our show, was something I'm super proud of it to this day. It was reality TV, but it was a beast of a project, every single one. There wasn't any, faking the amount of workload that there was there.
Yeah.
And the time frame was just, ridiculous. And so it was this really amazing experience, turned into a pretty cool show, went for, 5 seasons, did, probably 90 episodes. And each one of those was a home we were building.
Yeah.
And so, that was over 7 years. I'd love to talk about all things tiny homes. For me, I see this wide range of types of homes that are in this umbrella, but I also see just as wide range of people that are interested in tiny homes for different reasons, right? And there are people who are very much just devout minimalists and are drawn to just living in the small space for all of the reasons that, people articulate. That's not how I got drawn into it. I was more, drawn in, I think, more from the kind of the van life mentality of, hey, I don't need a lot. I want to have this big life. So I was definitely in on the minimalism, but it was more about the portability of the structure that appealed to me in the beginning.
All right. So during the course of Tiny House Nation, you filmed over 90 episodes, and you basically built 90 tiny homes.
Well, there's 84 official episodes. 2016, I started working with a nonprofit called Operation Tiny Home. And, we were doing everything from what you might see on the show, like a full-size tiny home, all the bells and whistles, down to the very more modest tiny homes that are being used in villages for homeless people, right? So we were kind of doing that whole range. But yeah, I'm not even including the homes that I was a part of with the nonprofit.
Yeah. Well, so the tiny home movement It really has started more than a decade. It's almost 2 decades. Is it getting close to that, or right around a decade ago?
Yeah. Like, I mean, the person that I think of as like really the founder of the modern tiny home movement is this guy, Jay Schaefer. And he built his home in like 1999, I think. And he started really getting recognition for it when he moved it across the country in like the early 2000s. The early financial crisis in 2008, coupled with, at that time, the explosion in the home sizes, right?
Yeah.
Like late 90s, early 2000s was where you really started seeing like, the more developments going to these bigger and bigger kind of tract homes. And so there was also an element of kind of cultural backlash, I think, to that, right?
Yeah.
So it was the two things. It was the financial aspects. People got crazy scared, looking for new options. And then also just kind of definitely tied to kind of environmentalism, this kind of idea that, hey, we need to scale back. And so
it's interesting as far as even that. I have an architect that we're working with a little bit right now, and he won't design a house over X amount of square footage, which I thought was a really interesting perspective, because sometimes you get these really big homes you can design, they're really cool, they're like a masterpiece, but he just said, that's my commitment to sustainability. And it's interesting, all of us have to have a commitment to that. It's important.
Yeah. I feel like it's important that we try as much as we can as a society to be more efficient with the resources that we have. So that's all I'm preaching is like, yeah, we do have, we are being called, whether you're, spiritual about it or whatever, to kind of say, hey, we can be better stewards of this land. And part of that is like, how can we fill our needs with the resources that are being provided, and utilizing them with respect is a big piece of that,
Yeah.
in my mind. But what I'm looking at is tiny homes as this actual really great tool for us, if we use it wisely, for us to address some of our housing needs. And so that's the real piece of it that keeps me motivated, is like, yeah, we have this crisis in housing. We have, homelessness that's a sadness. We have loneliness in our country as well, and then we also have an environmental crisis. And here I'm looking at a tool for us, essentially, that if we choose to, we can use it to help us address all of that.
Well, let's jump into that a little bit. So, I'm sure it's similar in Washington, but Colorado's seen a lot of population growth and, rising housing costs. I mean, it's hard.
There's a lot of parallels.
Yeah. It's really hard to, charge enough, but also, make it to where everyone can afford a home out here even. Yeah. Do you think that tiny home communities could become a bigger part of Colorado's future, or just even nationwide? Do you think it will become more of a thing?
I do think tiny home communities are certainly one answer and one way that we can utilize this housing type. To me, I believe that tiny homes as accessory dwelling units has far more potential to actually impact our housing needs. Like, living in closer proximity to neighbors is a really great way to kind of expose yourself to socialization. And we see that also within the tiny home villages for homeless people. And what I would have to say, as somebody who's really been immersed in this, is that I believe that there is power into that. I also believe that as those communities get larger and larger, they kind of lose the ability to provide those things that people are looking for, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think that if you take like a tiny home village for homeless people, and it's about a 25 home village, and it's a great solution and there's not a lot of problems, then you try to scale that to, a 250 home village. All of a sudden, a lot of the benefits that come from that kind of like community get questionable, right?
I see. Yeah.
And harder to achieve.
So the, accessory dwelling units in Colorado, it's interesting. They passed a statewide law to basically allow ADUs in a lot more places that they were very much so restricted. So now basically a lot. We get a lot of clients coming to us. Hey, we're considering an ADU now with the state law. So we've built a couple of actually ADUs. I built one. It's about 450 square feet. I don't know if that's considered tiny.
That fully is a tiny house. That's fully tiny house.
And then we built one, I think a 600 square foot ADU, something like that. And it was definitely like a mother-in-law ADU. But so you see really a bit of a movement with ADUs is what it sounds like for tiny homes.
Yeah, I do. And I think tiny homes solves some of the major blockages to accessory dwelling units actually being really impactful to like the housing supply. Right now, California is building 20% of the new construction is accessory dwelling units, right?
Wow.
And so far, that's only 0.5% of the potential properties that are theoretically allowed to do this, right? So there's still a lot of opportunity for more ADUs to be built. And so, the vast majority of ADUs are being built as kind of mother-in-law apartments, guest homes. A lot are being used as, vacation rentals and Airbnbs. If you have enough money to afford your mortgage, plus throw an ADU in your backyard, you're probably not hurting, right? And so you just don't really have the incentive to rent it out, That we've identified as the real block of why this isn't having the impact. Having it on, relocatable is the term I like to use for tiny homes on wheels. Right? Because you're not really moving it around like an RV. You're moving it from place to place, and like most of these tiny homes are getting moved maybe 3-4 times in their life. But having the capacity to not be tied to a permanent foundation, what that means is that, you could own a property, I could own the tiny house, you could just rent me the spot in your backyard. And your investment is probably like 5, 10, depending on how far you're trying to make that pad, because you're going to have to run utilities. There's still going to be an investment there. But compared with building an entire, ADU, that's a lot easier for people to get going on. Building an ADU, that's a permanent thing, right? It's hard to do that.
So really going back to your roots of having a tiny home on wheels. And using it as an ADU. So essentially people making a spot in their backyard, having the utility hookups and everything to have that tiny home, making it look nice so then it looks like it is meant to be there. But making that so that somebody could down the road move that. And they could even use that same slab to build an actual ADU down the road.
And there are a lot of places that are opening up their zoning for this. And basically, tiny homes on wheels aren't covered in the building codes. I should probably explain that I'm also on a committee that is developing building codes for tiny homes on wheels. Right now, there are a lot of different cities, primarily, that have basically opened up their zoning policy to allow for tiny homes on wheels to be used as accessory dwelling units. And this is done partially by opening up their building codes. They essentially are creating a definition that I call ANSI Plus, where you're basically using the RV code, which covers RVs, but also park model RVs, as the base requirement. And this is what a lot of people don't understand, is that tiny homes on wheels are essentially categorized as recreational vehicles. And so they are similarly treated by zoning ordinance. And typically, recreational vehicles are only allowed to be lived in seasonally. So they max out, different states have different limits on that. Anyway, so as you can imagine, it's complex, right? It's not as easy as saying, hey, let's allow for tiny homes on wheels to be used as accessory dwelling units, because you got to figure out, okay, what is a tiny house on wheels? What is what's the standard that we're going to use and recognize? How do we want to, put parameters around this? And because there isn't any essentially, universal building code that is nationally recognized, it means that every city is essentially coming up with their own kind of little nuanced, different definition. And it's kind of piecemeal.
Can be completely different based on what building official there? Is there a chief building official? I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of interpretation, there's a lot of extra work anytime you go into a place that has like snow loads or something, because most of these ordinances are being based off of one that was written in Fresno. That was kind of the very first place that it got done. So anyway, so that's just to kind of give you a lay of the land. What I am really heavily invested in right now is working with the 1215 Offsite Building Committee with the ICC, where we are essentially working on coming up with a universal building standard that will be considered to be adopted into the ICC, which would go into the International Residential Code, right? Which is really like, short of HUD kind of doing it, right, and incorporating it into HUD codes. That's really like the pathway to get this to be an option nationally.
So as far as the big picture of things, what you're seeing is that affordability can really happen with an ADU on wheels, essentially, or a tiny home on wheels, as long as the building departments and jurisdictions allow that, and that there is more of a defined code behind that. Yeah. And you're working on all that.
When I talk about the potential of tiny homes, people in their minds, they're like, if this was true, this would be happening.
Yeah.
Right? That's their proof. They're like, well, dude, if people really wanted to live in tiny homes, you would see a lot of tiny homes. This wouldn't just be something on TV.
Well, I also feel like if that helped me to see the big picture of it, because really it helps with the affordability too, because if you can just do it on wheels or a steel foundation that maybe even take the wheels off, you just set it down, you connect it to the ground and whatnot. You can also cut the cost of building those down, because instead of building them out in the field, you can build them in a shop or a warehouse.
When you actually go talk to businesses that are doing it, it's not as substantial as you might expect. Yeah. And because part of that is because there is so much labor still on site, right? Where a tiny home, it's one modular unit, right?
Yeah. You
basically level it out, you throw your deck on there or your stairs, and that's the end of it, right? And so it's got all the advantages of off-site construction, but it also doesn't have nearly as many kind of also challenges that drive costs. When I talk about costs, I have to be careful, because what I really see is the most significant driver in the affordability of this is the fact that they are not tied to property, right? That's what drives the affordability of a tiny house. But there's also the understanding from a builder that your cost per square footage is going to increase because you're concentrating all of the most expensive parts of a home, the utilities, the kitchens, the bathrooms, all into kind of a smaller footprint. Very few people would be building tiny homes as small as they're being built if they were on a permanent foundation.
Yeah.
Right? The drive to really have the 400 and under square foot tiny homes, that really comes from portability primarily. I see just a massive portion of the significance of tiny houses when we're talking about what it can do for society tied to that ability to be relocated.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to see how the codes on that move forward over the next couple years. I know you're working on it. It's impressive.
Obviously, having something that's inside the building codes is going to be massive, right? Because a lot of the resistance from people, they're not opposed to it. They just don't want to see it being done kind of willy-nilly without any kind of regulations. And they want to be convinced that the regulations have gone through the official process. So I'm just going to come out there and say it. The primary issue that I see working on building codes for tiny homes in compliance with what is currently there are the energy codes. If you live in a tiny house, you're going to be using just a fraction of the total energy of the average size home.
Yeah.
And somehow there's no capacity to give allowances to kind of use a less efficient wall construction, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though, that's really a big driver of the cost of these.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, because obviously our energy codes are made for homes. Probably standard 2,000 square feet and up.
Yeah, and it really comes down into the way that the energy codes quantify efficiency. And what I mean by that is that it's all based upon a ratio between the surface area and then the footprint.
It seems like it could be a real solution to a lot of the issues that you see with housing and ADU costs and everything.
I believe it can. I believe that it can punch above its weight in terms of the impact that it can have. And so the challenges that the movement faces now are different than they did in the beginning. We are not going to be able to build small homes that can be used as starter homes, that can be used for people to downsize. We're not going to do that if the numbers don't pan out.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it, right? You're not going to go into a project unless you know that there's like a way that you can come out ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to run your numbers, and it's all got to make sense. No pun intended on that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. It's got to make sense. And, tiny homes, they are a game changer in terms of running the numbers when especially if you're an individual and you're trying to, get into something that feels dignified and,
So I have a question on that. And this is, everyone that always comments on our posts, like, hey, how much does that cost? And how much does that cost?
Yeah.
So, typically when we're building a decent size home, really the numbers that we're seeing square footage cost is like $350 a square foot and up. And that's usually the base. What do you typically see? Do you do it by the square foot, or what do you typically see a tiny home coming in at?
So when I first got into tiny homes, which would have been like 2014, I built my first one in 2011, right? And I think I was coming out at like just over 300 square foot back then, right? And so nowadays, it's definitely, it's probably the same, right? Because like production, there are manufacturers that are kind of doing them in higher quantity. And so there are some builders like that. I know a builder in Portland, you can get a tiny home for $50,000.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's got a bathroom, it's got a kitchen, it's got, it doesn't look like a mobile home. It's definitely like a tiny house for $50,000. That's the cheapest that you're ever going to get into one.
The floor is the floor is around $50,000 for a tiny home. What do you see as like the higher end tiny home?
We're doing homes on our show. We were just working on one that was $250,000.
Wow.
It was maxed out. It was like 40 feet long, 10 foot wide, 14 foot ceilings. And it was being built for a guy who lost his house in the fire in LA.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he wasn't short on money. Down in LA, you can't even get a builder.
It sounds like the lowest price at 500. How many square feet is the $50,000 one?
I think that was on a 24-foot trailer, so that would have been like 8.5 by 24.
So like 200 square feet. So that's around $250 a square foot. So that's a pretty realistic range, $250 to $650. But it helps people know kind of the base and the upper end on what a tiny home could cost, for sure.
Yeah. And this is what it comes down to me, is it's like, this is the lowest rung on the housing ladder, if that makes sense. Like, we're talking about the most affordable housing type possible.
The entry level, in a sense.
If there's something that I can bring to the world of tiny homes, it's trying to use my platform to get them more widely accepted and considered as a legitimate housing option. And I think, what it really kind of comes down to is that we need to be looking at what our actual issue is. And right now, I think the conversation is dominated by the idea that that we just don't have enough homes, and the housing affordability crisis, because we haven't been building. I'm a builder. I'm totally in support of industry. I'm know that developers have got to be a part of this. But what I'm trying to say is that leaves out of the conversation the question of what types of homes do we need? And to me, when you look at the demographics of our country right now, you see a big imbalance between our housing supply and the way that people are living. And what I mean by that specifically is that we've primarily been building, single family homes, and they've been getting bigger and bigger. So primarily it's 3 and 4 or 5 bedroom homes. And at the same time, we now have more single adults living alone than there are families with children. And when you couple that with the amount of couples that are living together without children in the household, it's over half of our country is 1 and 2 person households. And only 7% of our housing supply are 1 bedroom housing options.
If someone if they were looking to start a tiny home project, like say they were wanting to do it themselves, like they just were trying to jump into it and do it themselves, what would you say is the first thing they should get started on?
First thing that they need to do is have some idea of where this tiny home, if it's being built off-site, you need to know where it's going. Are you going to be building this to the RV codes? Are you going to be building it to HUD codes? Are you going to be building it to the off-site modular codes? Or are you just going to go rogue and not build it to any codes whatsoever? So, those are basically kind of your options. But for the most part, most builders are going to be building, if you want to get it certified, which is important for insurance, which is also important for any kind of financing. And it's also in Colorado, you should know that they did pass a tiny house law that basically granted it or created a pathway statewide.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a definition in Colorado of what a tiny house on wheels is. And you just need to figure out what the laws around that housing type are in the location that you're going to put it.
So one, just figure out where you're going to put it and then look into the local codes or regulations behind it. And then would you say next after you figure...
Call the planning department, just ask them straight up, what are your policies on park models? And then the other thing I might do is check out Tiny House Industry Association website.
So we'll put that, link to that in our description down below on the video here.
And people can check that right after they like and subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, there we go. The call to action, as you call it. So the other thing is, so after they get through figuring out the local where they're going to put it, the local codes, then get started on design. I would imagine next kind of make a drawing for what you're wanting to build. Is there any good resources for that you suggest?
The coolest resource that's going on, there's a company called Tiny Easy that makes a tiny house design program that's actually geared towards builders. Yeah. It's not like it's not necessarily just a consumer product. And it's pretty sweet. You can go through there. You got all your different roof planes. For the most part, I do most of what I do in SketchUp.
So just design them yourself with SketchUp is another way too. So here's another question. Out of the hundreds of tiny homes that you've built, what's your favorite feature that you built into a tiny home?
You know what? I came prepared for this question. No. I'm gonna say that my favorite thing that I ever did on a tiny house was I put a roof on a hydraulic lift system. Right? Okay. The biggest problem with tiny homes, coming from living in them, is that you're trying to maximize the use. A lot of people go with lofted bedrooms, right? And it's totally okay. It works, but there's nothing luxury about a lofted bedroom. And as for me, after living in one for 3 years, that was the biggest, basically drawback. Yeah. That I had, that I just couldn't get around. Like everything else, I was totally fine. It wasn't really any, and it was like, sleeping in a really cramped bedroom. So this essentially was about half of the house, maybe a little less than half of the house, that was on a hydraulic lift system that basically jacked it up like 6 feet.
Oh, right? Wow.
Which means that you can have it really tight when it's down. Yeah. So that you can have more room underneath the loft, right? Because you have a loft and you had all your things. So a lot of times with tiny homes, you have really cramped headroom in the bedroom, but it's also under the loft is really tight. This solved the whole thing, and I did it in a way where then I had a rooftop deck. Oh, so wow. It basically it was done kind of like a 3-sided kaleidoscope or telescope. Yeah. So imagine like a telescoping thing, but one side was open, right? And then one wall folded over, and then you set it back down, and it had a door out to the rooftop deck, and you had nearly 7 feet of head clearance under the loft, and you had nearly 8 feet in the bedroom with this walkout deck. And to me, it's like so much of the design is done around the constraints of the road for tiny homes.
That's cool. Well, that answers a lot of questions about tiny homes or tiny houses. Whatever you want to roll and how you want to say it is what I learned today. Anything else you want to talk about, Zach?
I just want to tell everybody that if they like Tiny House Nation, that they are in luck, because we are filming a new show called Tiny House Revival, and we got 5 episodes out on YouTube. First season's all good to go. So if you have been kind of bummed out that there hasn't been any new episodes of Tiny House Nation, you are in luck. You just got to find us on YouTube and check out Tiny House Revival.
There it is. So we will put that in the link below too. So new Tiny House Revival. Well, sounds good. Well, thank you everyone for watching. This is another Ask a Builder episode. We thank Zach for jumping on. It was truly enjoyable to learn a lot about tiny homes, but also just the impact it can have long-term on our housing affordability and how it can affect even ADUs. So we can really see, Zach, you're doing a lot of work to push it forward, and we are grateful for that. So thanks for jumping on.
Oh, it's been fun.
All right.
Have a good night.
All right, you too.